Hello everybody and welcome back to another not applicable Formula 1 video. I hope that you are well. I hope you're ready for the USA qualifying and Grand Prix tomorrow. But I thought I just want to interject a little bit, a bit of an impromptu video from me talking about Mercedes because they have become the talk of the grid, and depending on who you talk to, they've either just come up with a way to win this championship easily by an absolute mile, or they're in complete dire straits, their engines are going to blow up anytime soon and they're going to be completely out of the season. So it's very, very 50-50 at this moment in time on the grid for Mercedes. And I thought I'd get your guys' opinion and have a little chat through what's actually happening, because I feel a little bit bad for Red Bull at this moment in time. They've done everything they possibly can to get Max Verstappen the best opportunity to win this championship. I mean, he's won the most races, he's led more laps than everybody else combined, and yet he's only 6 points ahead of Lewis Hamilton. And it looks like Mercedes are actually just gonna, come out of nowhere, pull a rabbit out of a hat and suddenly become the fastest car out there. They were far and away the fastest car in Turkey. Valtteri Bottas won that race at a canter. And now in the USA, it's looking like it's going to be fairly similar. The Mercedes was nearly a second ahead of everybody else in free practice so far. So they've definitely found some pace over the last few weekends, and it's looking worse and worse if you're a Max Verstappen or a Red Bull fan. But there are sort of two key things I want to talk about today. The power unit situation at Mercedes, which could cost them this championship, and also this flexi rear end suspension that they've also got going on that Paul di Resta was so critical about yesterday, and has sort of sparked this fight between Hamilton and Verstappen fans. Let's talk about the power unit to begin with, because Mercedes, as we know, they are a power unit distributor to 4 different teams on the grid. There's Mercedes, Aston Martin, Williams, and of course McLaren all use Mercedes engines. But recently it looks like the Mercedes engine is starting to fall apart a little bit, specifically if you are Valtteri Bottas, winning his first race of the season last time out in Turkey. But now it's looking worse and worse for him, as he's going to bring his 6th engine change, power unit change for this season. That is a lot of power unit changes. And also Vettel and Russell are bringing power unit changes this weekend in the US as well, meaning they're all going to probably end up with grid place penalties. But Toto Wolff has said since the mid-year, there's been some underlying reliability issues, which is not good if you're a Mercedes power unit user. And unfortunately, these issues keep coming back. So there's no durability in these engines, and therefore they're a massive DNF risk. And as I said, when you've got 4 different teams on the grid, and all of which could DNF at any point because their engine could pretty much just give up at any point, you're going to start to be a little bit worried. But you're going to be most worried if you are Lewis Hamilton at this point, because Lewis Hamilton cannot afford to have an engine issue, and he is 6 points behind Max Verstappen right now. He needs to gain up those points, and I think if he gets a DNF at any point this season, the title race is over. I think genuinely, if Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton DNF in any of these last 6 races, it's pretty much over, unless of course it's another incident like Imola where they both collide and both DNF. I think otherwise it's pretty much over for whoever DNF. So you've got to be really worried if you're a Lewis Hamilton fan, because they cannot try different parts on other cars. I think this is where a little bit of confusion is coming in. People are saying, oh, they're doing it for Valtteri Bottas so that they can keep testing different engines for Valtteri Bottas, and eventually they'll get this golden standard engine that they can use for the last few races, pop that into Lewis Hamilton's car, he'll win the championship by a mile. But unfortunately, they can't just, give Lewis Hamilton this perfect engine, because they cannot try different parts on other cars. The specification for all of the engines has to be the same for all of the cars. So this is going to actually be a really, really big talking point over the last 6 races. Has already become quite a big talking point if you're Valtteri Bottas' side of the garage, but is going to become an even more pressing matter for Lewis Hamilton. Toto Wolff has said that they've got on top of it and that everything should be sorted by now, but You never know whether he's just saying that to the cameras. And actually behind the scenes, he's a little bit more worried. Second thing I want to talk about, though, is this gain that they've managed to find in Turkey, and specifically this rear end suspension. Lots of talk again. As I said, I woke up this morning, saw this Paul di Resta video on Sky, and people with lots of contrasting opinions about it. So effectively, what's happened is they've changed the rear suspension on the Mercedes car. Something they're allowed to do, parts change on cars all the time. What is the big deal? Well, what they've actually done is changed it so that as the Mercedes gains speed on the straight, so effectively what's happening is as the Mercedes is gaining speed on the straights, accelerating down the straights, it's increasing the drag on the rear wing. This is just what happens. If you move through a fluid, your drag increases with speed. So as they're gaining speed, the drag is increasing and increasing and increasing. And it's getting to a point where it's getting to this turning point on the rear wing. And effectively, what's happening is as they hit this sort of crucial speed, you'll see the entire rear end of the Mercedes car just drop very, very suddenly. And that sudden drop is what people are a little bit concerned about. And the fact that this is obviously lowering their downforce, it means they can go a lot quicker on the straights than they were beforehand. But when it pops back up for the corners, they still have the downforce required to get around the slower and higher speed corners. And it sort of goes back a little bit to the start of the season when everybody was talking about the rake differences between Red Bull and Mercedes. Red Bull known for having a very, very high rake, therefore they're much better in the slower speed corners and those slower kind of tracks, whereas Mercedes known for having quite a low rake, generally better on the straights and those higher speed corners. And decreasing the rake on the straights like Mercedes is doing here with this drop in suspension is massively helping them to gain that top speed down those straights, which massively helps when you've got tracks like Kota, like Turkey, where there are some straights you can really benefit from that on. And actually, all Formula One cars do this. I realised actually it's not a ingenious Mercedes thing. The Mercedes team, as much as they are phenomenal, it's not something that they've come up with. All of the teams do this. All of the teams, and it just naturally happens. The suspension is a spring. As the drag increases, the rear wing gets pulled down, and it naturally happens as the cars gain speed. So it's not Mercedes gaining a massive amount from this. Everybody does this. People are getting angry and sort of starting to argue whether or not this is an active suspension that Mercedes have. Now, that is completely illegal in Formula One, and this is the thing that could really make or break Mercedes' season. Personally, I think there's nothing wrong with it, and it could be absolutely fine, because an active suspension is something which changes the ride height, so lowers the ride height by the driver in the cockpit. So if Lewis Hamilton, say, had a button which then dropped the suspension at the back, that is illegal. That is no longer allowed. But I think this is purely natural, and I think that's really unfortunate for Max Verstappen and those Red Bull fans. Is what Mercedes have done here is legal, and they've just sort of found a way to benefit off of something that people haven't started to really look into. It's another innovation. It's one of those things that Mercedes have been so good at over the last few seasons, innovating, making steps forward with the car, and hence why so many people are trying to copy various parts of the Mercedes. You only have to look at Racing Point last year to know that the Mercedes car is the one to watch and the one to copy. And if you're a Max Verstappen fan, Red Bull need to come back at Mercedes with something very, very soon, because they are gaining so much on the high-speed corners and on the straights compared to the Red Bull now that it is getting a little bit silly, and it's making it very, very easy for that man there, Lewis Hamilton, to look like he is going to increase his lead in the Formula One World Championship if he can get past Max Verstappen this weekend, which is looking more and more likely. So Mercedes have just found a way to innovate. They've gained, and they've obviously tested this, but it's whether or not they can finesse that rule and get around all of this suspicion and also deal with the pressure that is coming along with this title fight. It's very, very interesting. Obviously, I made a video during the week. Most people think that Hamilton is going to come out on top. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. What's your thoughts on the power units? Do you think this is going to cost Mercedes? Do you think Lewis Hamilton might end up with a DNF because he hasn't been able to change as many engine parts as Valtteri Bottas? What do you think about this flexi rear end? How impressed are you with Mercedes? I'm genuinely really impressed with this innovation that they've come up with. Like, it seems so simple, but obviously with the millions of moving parts in a Formula One car, this is an incredible leap forward that they've made. I'm very, very impressed. But as I said, I'd love to know your opinions down in the comments below. Leave a like whilst you're there, subscribe, and I will see you later for the United States Grand Prix qualifying, and of course tomorrow for the race itself. Have a good one.